Hello and welcome to another episode of Mystique Femininity. In this episode, I like to call the end of the good girl era, when being palatable stops working. I want to dive into this notion of evolution. So, as little girls, we are groomed and taught to be nice, to be pleasant, to be kind, to be generous. Share your toys, share your snacks. Make yourself be something that others like. This over the years of from your parents to school to Girl Scouts, anything you can imagine. Little girls and teenagers are programmed to be what is submissive and to take up as least of space as possible because making room for others is the goal and should be your aim to please. Now, this can vary depending on your ethnicity, but overall, little girls and teenager girls are told, be it directly, and sometimes those direct messages can come with brute force or what I like to call absorbed messages, which is just the observation of societal mantras and societal expectations. That messaging is absorbed into one's psyche, and it's just how things are. We see things on TV, movies, magazines, and especially for young children, they're extremely impressionable, which is why the power that is push these particular narratives out for the masses in order for those things to be then easily digested. And if you show some wins about it, then it makes it even more incentivized to grab hold to and to move. Now, the good girl doesn't somehow by osmosis disappears into adulthood. Now, we'll just say that the good girl who's been a good girl all her life, she baked cookies, she gave her brother her snacks when he ate up his, she hid the fact that he broke a vase, and she's always just been very amenable. Well, just fast forward it, and she's done that through her high school, she's done that through college, and now she is 35, 40 years old. May have a family, may not, but essentially those good girl habits die hard. And now she's left very tired. But this isn't that tiredness that you can do some, improve your sleep hygiene on. This is the kind that takes over your entire body. I look at it on a cellular level. And this exhaustion lingers. It colors your world. It colors how you engage with the world. And this makes your life on the outside, it may look fine, but deep down, because of that deep exhaustion, you're not able to even challenge the fact that this is not life that I feel honorable, respected in. So by the time women get into their 30s, definitely in their 40s, especially if you've been operating this way, you are you're confused, but you're not confused about who you are. You're just more so confused by the fact that you have been maintaining this illusion for so many years. This episode is for the woman who has done everything possible correctly, but you have been paying your life force and your vitality by keeping up this facade. Now, the way I love to operate in this podcast, I like to get into some of the intuitive. I always want to give you some practical and leave you with some things to nosh on. So, for a long time, Goodness was not a choice. It was a way of being to survive. It was strategy. So I think back when I look at history of women, thinking 1900s and even beyond, but especially when the powers of be went from the matriarch to the patriarchy. Because there was a time where women were highly visible, highly empowered, and things were done a different way. But when things became a flip and things became into a patriarchy, especially when modernized cults, I mean, religion began to take over, which essentially religion villainizes women to the point of that this nice girl kind of archetype is what is pushed out. So, in order to survive, and I also think if you have come from any cultural background, so anyone who is from a more not of the majority sort of ethnic woman, then there was a strategy that you needed to be agreeable, you needed to be very helpful, you need to be easy to manage. You need to be emotionally fluent. You need to be anticipating someone's needs in order to be seen well. You need to be someone who is smooth. You absorb, you adjust and adapt, but you make sure you do it with a smile and make sure you look pretty. Now, early in life, though, that strategy may have worked. It kept you safe. You got to still be, you were still invited to the sock ops, to the parties, to the brunches, and it kept conflict at bay. You know, you might have been able to snag a husband by being this way. So when he took you home, his family co-signed that, oh my God, yes, she's wonderful. That's perfect. Even though you had a very different view in that experience. But there comes a time as you progress and evolve that you continue to write checks that your body can't cash. And your body beforehand could take this on, but your mind has gotten to the point that it no longer wants to operate in this meek, modest, demure way of being. And so the mind begins to start fighting with this strategy. And so, what the body does, since it's basically, you won't listen to me, I got to make you feel. And so, you start feeling chronic fatigue. So, pick up some energy drinks, you're drinking coffee like it's water, you're doing anything that you can to try to perk up. And as this tension keeps building, it gets worse and worse. And it doesn't relieve itself. So you may even start drinking more wine, doing things to try to make yourself relax. And the deeper, more core area is that you have a certain resentment that you can't quite put your finger on. It's not that you're trying to be rebellious, you're not having a midlife crisis. It is just the fact that internally, you no longer can cooperate with self betrayal. The good girl act has to stop. And your body will not relent until you start to make some adjustments. Because when the body and the mind are out of alignment, you will not know peace. I believe certain conditions that pop up during the perimenopausal phase of a woman's life, it's essentially the way I look at it from a spiritual angle, not just, I'm not a doctor, so there are definitely some medical conditions that go in it, but I believe some of these conditions, especially the heaviness, the chronic fatigue, the depression, the identity crisis, a lot of that I firmly believe is your essentially having to do a review of what you've been doing, how you've been living for X amount of years. And oftentimes there is a reconciliation process, and you start to notice that your the debt that you are been putting out there is not being received back. You're not getting that mutual reciprocity. There isn't, you've paid in and you're receiving out. There's a very much unequal balance. Now, from a spiritual, emotional way, there is a cost to being palatable for too long. Goodness can only be done so much to the point that you begin to erase who you are. When you begin to you try to continue to flow in a way that, once again, in your younger years may have been very successful, your body and the spirit are not going to be, they're not going to like each other. They're not going to flow. When your kindness is no longer chosen, but it's forced, your spirit will begin to resist, and it's quiet at first. It's a quiet resistance, but the more years you get added to your belt and things become to intensify, it just becomes to where it is a 5 alarm fire, and you no longer can be comfortable in how you operate. I believe, and I know I mentioned this in one of my previous episodes this season, that in our society, for what is considered a mature woman is to be liked and to be able to absorb whatever people put out to you. That is not a true marker of maturity. If anything, it is a great marker for immaturity and the lack of self respect. Internally, when things are not aligned, they will begin to disrupt the roles that you were once rewarded for playing. It's like you used to be able to play this game and you were really good at it, but now you are starting to not get the same thrill that you used to. I'll use an example. Let's say there was something that you used to enjoy. So it could be a meal, could be a drink, it could be an activity. And at one point, that was your thing. You loved it. It was everything. But over the years, you've noticed that that sparkle that you once had about it begins to fade. And so you aren't able to get that same thrill from that. And that is what happens with the good girl era. The end of that good girl era is not some sort of failure, because our society will try to lead you to believe that you didn't try hard enough. Now you're an old maid and you're worthless. I like to look at the fact that you're able to even acknowledge that you're in that phase as a high mark of maturity and evolution and developmental milestone for you as a woman. To be able to understand why you operated the way you did, and then acknowledging it, appreciating what it did, because it was trying to keep you safe. It was trying, in our society, we are wired to be connected in community. And so oftentimes we will do anything within our power to stay within that community. And so many people in this world, no matter what gender expression that they are, they try to suppress as hard as they can in order to stay within community. But eventually, suppression will break you on a existential level, and you will have no choice but to take heed to the messages. Now let's move into the practical. So we acknowledge that we've been operating in a way that has been palatable. The good girl also can be very, very, I don't want to say trendy, but just can feel very comforting. It feels cozy. And I want to believe that the reason why it feels this way and why it can be a challenge to want to even to acknowledge that one is in it and that the era needs to end, it's just that it feels our systems have been wired to feel good by being in this way. And so when we have to acknowledge it, because the way programming is done, it's to be super innocuous. So therefore you don't even notice it, but to really get into your body, which is again something that our society really does a great job of making it to where we are so depleted, so malnourished energetically that we can't actually acknowledge that something's wrong. But once you are able to, it just feels very painful. It feels as though you are leaving yourself. And for some people, that true core, they enjoy giving. They enjoy being pleasant and, they enjoy being agreeable. And there's nothing wrong with those traits. It is just that if you are doing it to out of the focus and drive of safety, so now that is an issue. If it's not from a genuine, true expression of who you are, but you're doing it in order to make others like you, in order to keep your job, in order to keep your spouse, or to maybe date or to gain friends, you're operating out of fear. You're operating out of a lack driver. Therefore, that is when that is a problem. But wanting to be kind and generous to the world is not a negative thing. So there's also a piece I want to leave is that being good, there are benefits to being good and there are, great traits that are embodied within this. But with everything that you do, you have to make sure that the alignment of it is of a true expression of self versus a cosplay. Because often we grow resentful because it isn't a genuine expression of self, or there isn't the balancing where you've been overgiving, overdoing, and you're not being replenished back. So therefore, that resentment starts to build, and then it blows and potentially could ruin a bunch of relationships. Now, from a practical standpoint, I want you to sit with yourself and I want you to really chew on these questions. Where am I confusing goodness with safety? Sometimes we believe that being this way is good, but again, it's coming from a place of psychological safety needs. So let's say, for instance, you are dating someone or you are, at work. And in order to, this person that you're engaging with is very combative, very demanding, and borderline cruel. If you always concede, you always absorb their foolishness, essentially, that is not coming from a place of goodness. That is actually coming from a place of safety. And also, it does harm to that other person too, because they need to know that their behavior isn't acceptable. And so that goodness really is not good, is actually very, very damaging to both parties. But for you, just focusing on you, that drive to behave in this way is coming from a place of safety. And if you're not feeling safe with the person, then that really begs the question, why are you engaging with them? So again, where am I confusing goodness with safety? Next question, what does my body resist even when logic complies? Again, are there people, places that you just, when you even think about it, your back starts to hurt, your neck starts to tighten, your stomach starts to get into knots? Really listen to your body. Our world has made it to where we do not have enough time or we are not able to really maximize and utilize our time in a way that is equitable and self-preserving. We are burnt out to the max, and that's done by design. But if you are able to begin to be okay in your body, because a lot of times we're dissociative states of being, because it's this world right now is kind of like, what the heck, like yikes, on a consistent level. But if you are able to be in your body, then actually take heed to your body's messaging system, it lets you know a lot. But again, either we are just so out of alignment in our bodies, or as I actually myself recently experienced and had to reflect, sometimes we will mute those notifications that our body is sending us because we believe pursuing this certain path is the thing to do. When in actuality, your body reactions are telling you, no, this is not it. This is not where I want to be. Yet we continue to push. So again, what does my body resist even when logic complies? Number 3, what would it cost me to stop being palatable? This question, if you take nothing away from this particular podcast episode, and I hope that you shared with a friend, because we don't gatekeep, we share here. This is a really pivotal question. What would it cost me to stop being palatable? Would it cost you your marriage, your family, your job, your girl group, your church? Like, what will it cost you? Would it cost you the outdated version of yourself that you keep trying to push forward? Like, it can cost you everything. And depending on where you are, sometimes that release is the greatest thing that you can do that will elevate you to the new heights. I do not want you to try to go through these questions quickly, because they're not meant for that. This is a question that you slowly sip. This is like a good bourbon. You don't just shot that, you slowly sip, or you'll be on the floor. I want you to take these questions and your meditation time and really allow them to reveal things to you, and just notice it. Don't judge it. Listen, take heed, and extend yourself a lot of grace. The end of the good girl does not make you cruel, doesn't make you a bitch, doesn't make you anything that society might deem as negative. It actually makes you very honorable to everyone in your reality. Because when you are operating from a true, genuine expression, this often will make it to where others can do the same. And those that may start to question, because that will occur when you begin to move differently, people will try to reactivate old code to get you back into the way that you were. And you may at times fall into that, because depending on the relationship, it can be difficult. Especially if it's like an intimate partner, it can be very difficult to not want to fall back in line. But as me, as a Venus Libra, whose focus with being that Libra is to have everything be appeasable, everything be warm and fuzzy, everything be great. The best gift that you can give the world in this reality is to be at your true expression. The moment that your inner world matches your outer behavior, it is like bliss. It will take some time depending on how deep you've been into the good girl path, but you will be reclaiming your sovereignty, your integrity, because when we live in a way that is contrary to what we are actually not living with integrity. And when you do this, you begin to start living consistently with integrity. It is a deep stabilizing, grounding force that you, as a woman who are divinely connected to the outer realms, you can then begin to move so many things because you are now moving in a way that truly is organic. Now, to wrap this thing up, the good girl era doesn't have to be something that needs to be demolished. It doesn't need to be angry. It doesn't have to be a big catastrophic thing. But we need to release her from her job that she was never meant to actually have ever, but definitely wasn't meant to carry into the 30s and the 40s. And what you replace is not being hard, because that is also something that happens, is that we get into this notion of, well, I don't want to be a good girl anymore. I want to be a bad girl. Now, if you want to be naughty, that's great. There's always time and place, but the opposite doesn't make it any better. I believe it was in last season I brought up that the dark feminine isn't necessarily what it is depicted to be. So being bad, being hard for no reason other than to try to no longer be in the good girl era isn't actually helpful. That actually is extremely problematic. And I've experienced quite a few of these hard, brittle, wannabe bad girls, but really deep down, they're still in that good girl era, but it is extremely toxic. But what you want to be able to do is own your truth. And you want to be able to do that from an embodied, peaceful way. And that will allow you to release that good girl era and walk into your sovereign era. If this episode resonated with you, I would love it if you would leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening to this on, and share it with a friend that you believe this would be helpful. And until next time, make sure you're living your best life.